because I'm gonna die 5 minutes in. Billy! Billy!
Are we there yet?
Hi, I'm Luke Hector and this is The Broken Meeple, a show devoted to board games, and I'm here to warn you that
Kickstarter might be your enemy.
So we got an interesting little Kickstarter project today. This was kind of like a long forgotten Kickstarter. I ordered the Supernova pledge for this like a good year or two ago, probably a couple of years back, and it's been delayed coming out in general, but then it also got delayed even further because I was involved in a group pledge, and group pledges just seem to take forever. In fact, this will be the last time I ever do a group pledge because I just don't think it's worth it. The saving you make does not amount to the time you lose waiting for all the logistic rubbish to happen. But this one finally arrived with all the extras, and I'm talking this with all the little Kickstarter stretch goals and about 9 extra planets on top. I was a bit like, this was before the time when I started getting wise to this whole concept of buying everything at once. But I thought, you know what, I've heard a mixture of opinions on this and I wanted to check it out. I like Orange Nebula's other game Vindication quite a bit. It's appeared on my top 100. And I was at least curious to get into the base framework, as this one is called, which effectively gives you 2 planet scenarios, and delve into what it's like. So in total, I have played everything in this box, as well as the 3rd planet, which technically was an expansion on the Kickstarter, but that planet hasn't really changed my opinion much. You know, pretty much everything I'm about to say is relevant to the base framework as it is. So was this Kickstarter worth it, or is this the last hoorah in my quest to not buy everything I see in front of me?
Shut up and take my money!
Now, I don't want to spoil too much about the scenarios themselves, so you're not going to see me unpack, too much of these sort of aspects. We'll talk more about what's actually in the box. So you have got a bunch of game trays with that hold the various pieces that you need. Some of them have got tracks that you track various elements, but for the most part, they're all the pieces. But what you have is a scenario where you've landed on a planet and there's location cards. There'll be anomalies and discoveries for you to find, but they'll be free. Well, actually, they'll vary. There'll be several objectives that you need to complete in order to pass the scenario. You have a character that all looks the same between players, essentially that tracks your scientific progress to make breakthroughs and get really cool, like extra little buffs. You have an endurance marker, which once that ticks down, you're effectively out of the game. And if everybody's endurance hits 0, that's it, you're done. You have to basically get back to the ship and off before that runs out. But the primary function is the 6 action spaces in which you use these cubes. They're not dice. I know they look like dice, but you do not roll these ever. There is no die rolling for these anyway. But what these basically have is that they have a 1, 2, 3, and an hourglass on them. What you do on your turn is, when it is your turn, you have 3 of these. So let's say I've just got them on, these settings for the moment. What you have is you have the 6 die actions here. You'll have some other die actions for collecting resources, and the scenario might provide you with alternate ones. But you are essentially choosing 2 of these actions. Let's say I do traverse and theorize. And you place the die in each, you reduce their values down by 1 because it's effectively like a tick over focus marker. And the other one you must use to rest. So you have to rest, but that bumps the rating up by 1. So your cubes, I've got to get used to this. Your cubes are going to go up and down in focus values depending on what actions that you do. These actions that you do, things like move around the map quicker, that let you make scientific breakthroughs, let you discover like this opportunities on the different locations, which you can then investigate further in order to find specific things related to the planet, unique to these boxes. And if you grab those and manage to fulfill those, they can give you some cool little buffs, these little kind of like perks that you have, these free actions that you can do, providing you've got the resources. And kind of what you're doing throughout each scenario is, while you're trying to do the objectives, you want to find a few of these discoveries, get a few cool little abilities, but primarily you need to solve those objectives. And I won't go into too much detail, but the first planet, for example, has you landing on a toxic spore planet. So you can imagine what kind of stuff that would entail, but you have to basically fulfill the objectives and get off before you, well, in a sense, choke to death, I guess. But you can assist other players with some of these actions. So some of these actions relate to you, some relate to other explorers. So there is an element of cooperation in there. But the rest of the game is kind of guided by the planets themselves. You have a basic timer track, which you have to basically keep tabs on because your endurance marker goes down as a result. You have the resources to collect, data and minerals and power that are used to power certain objectives. You have some buildings that you can build, which doesn't apply for every scenario, but the tile's not there, but they sit on this track, and then these little breakthrough tokens basically allow you to do other actions or objectives. And the discoveries themselves will litter this tray here. There'll be 12 for each scenario, like planet box, and then these giant sort of strips or markers will mark on your locations where these potential opportunities are. You carry on in this fashion, taking turn after turn after turn until either your endurance runs down to 0, in which case you lose, or you manage to get the final objective done and you get off and, well, I guess you live another day.
Are we there yet?
So we'll start from a component perspective, and this is kind of a mixture of good and bad. I'd say the good outweighs the bad, but there are a couple of niggles. I mean, the production values are really, really cool. I mean, these giant cubes are really nice. You know, they're engraved, they're custom, they're chunky, and they fit in these slots. You know, these are dual layer boards, so this is all really good. Artwork stunning across the board whenever you see the artwork, and every tile in here nice and thick. You know, the big lunar miniature that you've got, some player miniatures which are just basically standard sculpt, but again, it's a cool miniature that you can easily tell apart who's who. And of course you've got these game trays which act as very good storage units for the various aspects of the game. There's definitely a lot of money that's gone into that aspect. Not all of it is great though. There are one or two things that do kind of irk me in a sense. The box size is one of those. I mean, this isn't exactly an easy box size to store on a shelf, you know, this kind of rectangular box, although I do like the fact it tells you how to put the game away on the outside. That's always nice to see. But also, there's a lot of wasted space in that box. It doesn't look huge, but if you don't sleeve your cards, there's a lot of space in these planet boxes that could have gone to waste, and you could have maybe packed 2 planets worth into each planet box.
We just make boxes here.
In terms of the setting and the theme, it is quite cool to venture onto each of these planets, which have different locations, different discoveries that you can make, different buffs that you can get, different objectives, and see what it is for yourself. I mean, there's, what, like 9, I think, now, if you get the expansion ones. There's 2 in this box, but you get a good amount of variety of, like, plays for each planet, because you've got the planet, like, seeing it for the first time, which is quite cool, but the objectives, the survival tasks, as they call them, come in 3 different sets. So when you play it first, you'll use set A, but then if you've got bored doing set A, you can use set B or set C, which have fundamentally different objectives from what the first slot is, even though it uses the same components to an extent. So each of these planet boxes effectively gives you 3 ways to play the game from a new perspective, and then you'll probably get slightly bored with the planet and move on to the next. But there's 9 of them available, and they're not that expensive. You know, I believe they sell for around the 15 to 20 quid mark per planet, and you're getting at least 3 full-size games, probably more, because you're going to fail a few of these games, and if you want to try and beat the puzzle, you're going to play it more often. So you get a decent bang for your buck for each of these planet boxes, providing you can find somewhere to store them, because I mean, 2 of them store in this framework, but if you want to get more of them, like 7 others, you better find some ways to get them stored rather easily. If you're into optimization puzzles, this game is clearly one you want to look at. The whole premise of each scenario is fundamentally, here's a puzzle done in various objectives. How do we solve this puzzle based on what we've got? Now, there's something I'll go into more detail with that a bit later, but it's a very crunchy puzzle, and there's definitely a lot of teamwork involved. It's not a game I suggest you play with a lot of players all the time, but playing this with 2 players works quite well, and if you play solo, you can just simply play 2-handed. But some of the abilities work on other explorers, so there is an incentive for you to use your abilities to help other players, and some of your breakthroughs and anomalies tend to work on every single turn, providing you've got the resources. So other players near you can utilize something that you found, and of course there's a nice little bit of back and forth debating with how are we going to approach this aspect. But the puzzles are definitely quite tight. More on that a bit later, but they're quite tight, so you don't have a lot of, freedom of leeway. And so when you're trying to solve the puzzle, if you're into that kind of thing of like, right, hang on a minute, say if I can go to here, I can use this die, if I do this action and this action, fine, but then I've got to rest with this one. we're gonna trigger that time icon if we're not careful. So maybe if I do this one, you use my little card, then can you support me later, and I'll move quickly to this other one. And because you always get to move this lunar module, this allows you to scout locations, harvest more resources. So, you know, there's an aspect of using that regardless of whether you're solo or multiplayer. It's definitely a very crunchy puzzle, and there's a lot to try and figure out for each scenario. There's not a huge amount of scope for solving each scenario, more on that a bit later, but if you are one of those people that loves to go, right, here's the puzzle. Ooh, it's beating me. Okay, right, how do we improve? How do we get past it now? Right, we need to do that, we need to do that. Then this game is gonna like absolutely sing for you. Now we're going to get onto the tray setups and that a little bit later, but setup wise, I gotta give this game credit. It's very quick, including the takedown. The rules may take you a while, more on that later, but you will be able to set this game up pretty quickly, other than if you've not seen like the planet before. If you're doing a planet box that you've already done, you'll know how a lot of it works, but even then it doesn't take that long to set up a new planet. But all you've got to do is effectively put out these trays, put out the location cards in the set per the planet box. Here's your board, take 3 cubes, take a miniature or so, and you're kind of almost set to go, really. And when you're packing it away, some of the stuff can just sit in the trays. A lot of the resources and bits and bobs like the cubes and that and the little tokens sit in this tray here. So once you've got everything back into the planet box, there's not a huge amount to take down either. And to be fair, for a game that is as involved in this one, it was pretty damn impressive how it managed to do that. There are a few negatives though that we do need to get through. Firstly, the rulebook. The rulebook is not terrible, but it is laid out in a bit of an odd fashion, and there's no real easy way to learn this game, you know, from the rulebook. You have to basically just jump in and read quite a lot of text before you even get to your first game. Now, it does a reasonable job of helping you set up the game for your first planet. So once you get the, you know, this one out, and it will tell you, right, lay the locations like this, put these there, great. But that's a lot of text I gotta read here. That's not even the whole rule book, right? This bit at the back is simply just advanced stuff where it tells you don't read it, it's all the glossary. But there's a lot of stuff that can happen here, as well as all the iconography. But even then, before then, you have got quite a lot of rules to get through. And they're not badly written, but I have seen better. But it's just quite a lot of rules absorption before you can get stuck in. It would have been great if they actually did a proper tutorial mission, and there isn't one in the box. You might think, oh, isn't that what the first planet is? No, the first planet is just simply low challenge, which actually just means how many like weird funky rules does it have, you know. So it's still a challenging scenario. You will more likely lose it your first time, but it just means that there's not a huge amount of extra faff to deal with. But it doesn't exactly guide you through the mission. You still have to kind of figure it out yourself. And, you know, something like Awakened Realms, who with Tainted Grail do like a big tutorial mission that guides you through every little step. This seriously could have done with one. It didn't have to be a full-on planet box. It could have been like a half the size box, or maybe even just a bunch of cards and a few location cards. And, you know, you use all the other trays anyway in every scenario, but it could have just guided you to learn this a lot better.
Don't open that! It's an alien planet! Is there air? You don't know!
This game's also ridiculous with the amount of table presence it does. Check out these photos. This is what it's like on my table. It takes up most of my gaming table to house this, and most of it is just because of the inefficient use of space with these trays. It's kind of insane. I mean, I have got 4 game trays here, right? All of these have to be out on the table, okay? As well as, playing solo, 2 of these player boards, both of which need cards to play to the side of them when you get your extra bits. You've got, you know, you've got your starting tile, but then you've got location cards that are the same as this, size-wise, that have to be laid in some funky little pattern or whatever. But look at the wastage on these trays. I mean, this is probably the most useful layout of them. It contains all the resources and some actions to harvest them and your stockpiles. Great, so this tray is fine. But then you have this tray. This tray is as big as all the other trays, and literally, I kid you not, it's there for 2 reasons, right? You put a timer track token on there, and you have a morale track, which is basically the equivalent of sad face, happy face. That's it. That's all this tray is used for. Now, they have bits at the bottom to say, put these cards underneath this bit of the board, but frankly, you don't need a tray to tell me to do that. I'll put them wherever I can see the space for them. But I have a whole tray for this aspect. What? And then this one, the moments one, you have 12 little tiles here that go in there for the different discoveries you can do, and the 2 big markers. Could these have not gone in a different tray, like in a storage box? And then you could just put these on the table somewhere in a pub? Why do I need a whole tray for this? And even this one, 3 buildings, some breakthrough tokens, which again do not need to be laid out in single fashion because it really makes no difference. And then just a bit there to put some other tokens and 1 solitary card. You know, all these trays laid out with each other take up so much table space, it's kind of ridiculous.
Please excuse the crudity of this model. I didn't have time to build it to scale or to paint it.
But now we got to get on to 1 or 2 of the issues with this game that are a bit bigger than the rest. And firstly, we're talking about how tight this game is. And I mean ridiculously tight. This game gives you the theme of like, oh, we're on a new planet. Now we got to explore stuff and see what's there and that. But no, you cannot do that. In order to succeed on any of these tasks, except possibly the first one you ever do, the first planet and survival task A, that one you have a little bit of flexibility. But the rest of them, if you do not know exactly how you are meant to solve each one, then you will lose. It's just going to happen. And it doesn't necessarily stem from, oh, I didn't play very well. It's just because you don't know what the objectives are and what it's demanding. And that just feels cheap. You know, this game has you with 12 different discoveries that you can make and all these different other things that you can do, but you can't. You simply don't have time.
My duty tonight, stop as much peril as I can. Now we got to find the Holy Grail. Come on.
Your endurance marker on your player board runs out super fast, you know, particularly with the timer track, because as you go through certain locations, you have to spend more time to travel than you normally would, and you have to use a time every round, and you've only got like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 steps. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 steps before it then loops back round and you lose an endurance. And you're doing this after every single turn. You have so little flexibility to do anything else in the scenario except exactly what you must do. For example, in the second planet, if you even think about grouping up together, you're gonna lose. With 2 of you, you must split up. You have to split up. If you do not split up, you will not be able to do the level 2 planet. It's physically impossible. You just will not have the time. But you end up with these situations where trying to solve a particular case requires you to do exactly what is required with no leeway to have a bit of fun, do a little bit of exploration, like the game is kind of expecting you to do. And so this creates the issue that your first game is likely, highly likely, to be a loss. Like, you might as well just say that your first game of each planet is a write-off, or even each survival task, really, is a bit of a write-off, because you have to basically adapt to what the planet is doing, and you won't know what the planet is doing until you've played through 1 game of it, unless you look at the objective cards in advance, but then you're kind of spoiling it. So which way do you go? Take something like Spirit Island, one of my favourite heavy sort of puzzly-esque games. Yeah, that's essentially a puzzle. You take your spirits, whichever ones you want to use, you have an invader sheet, it acts in a certain way, but for the most part the invaders will pop on various locations, they'll move, they'll build, the events will come out and do some random stuff, where they populate will be slightly randomised, and obviously what power cards you get are going to be slightly randomised, but when you get the stuff in Spirit Island, you still feel you have creative ways to succeed in a scenario. Like, I've grabbed these cards. Right, this forces me to play a little bit like this, but I can do that. I just got to mitigate this over here. And, all right, with your help, we can do this and we can do that. It's piling up over there. But wait, I've just got this master card. So, well, this really cool mastery card. If I use this, we can do that. And there's a lot of ways for you to mitigate some of that randomness in Spirit Island, even though some of it is present. Here, you don't have any means of mitigation. Nothing here mitigates the random element. And even though, there's not a ton of the randomness there, because it's so tight, you can't afford for anything to happen. But it also doesn't allow for any creativity in the game. There's no situation where during a scenario I felt like, oh, I did this really clever thing and then I was really able to succeed the scenario that way. No, it's like I drew this card, it had this cool power that was useful. Or it's more to the case that I went in the right direction to begin with and I grabbed these things and I did these actions and that's how you solve this particular mystery. in Spirit Island, I've had times where it's like, okay, we're doing this, this, and this. There's tons of people on this island. We're going to lose. Hang on a minute. You reckon you can sink that entire island piece? Right, well, hang on. Let me use this power combined with your ability. Right, we're going to push everybody to this island, and we're going to sink this island piece. Great, we've now just dealt so much fear and damage that we win this way. That's a really cool, creative way that you can finish a Spirit Island game. You don't get any of that here. There's no surprises once you know how to solve each planet.
What is it like in your funny little brains? It must be so boring.
And this problem actually gets worse when you add in more players. There's a bit of a mix of people who say that this game is really something you play solo, and some people who say this is one you really should play with other players. But honestly, I feel that this game is a solo, maybe a two-player game at most, because with solo, you play two-handed, or multi-handed, but honestly, with the space you need and all that, you might as well play two-handed. So you are essentially playing a two-player game in every sense of the word by yourself. So why play with two players? But at least the option is there. But when you throw in a third and a fourth, not only does the game take longer because of all the discussions and everything, but the problem that you get is one of you owns the game, which means you're going to know what these missions do, unless you, for whatever reason, take a planet like, one of the expansion planets and say, right, we're going to all do this for the first time, at which point you then have to tell everybody, we're going to lose this planet, it's just going to happen, but hey, have fun and explore and try and solve the puzzle. But let's say that I'm taking this to a game night and I'm going to use the first planet because I don't want to throw in too much for the people to learn. They've already got to learn a ton of rules from the teach. Well, I already know how the first planet works, and I know how the 3 different missions in it work, which means I know exactly how you're meant to solve each planet. So there's no surprises of what I can find, apart from, oh, these locations happen to group up in this particular way, but I have to kind of decide between being the alpha player and telling people how they've really got to act in order to solve this planet, which I don't like. Alpha gaming is not something that's good. But the alternative is to keep stum somehow and just accept that the game is going to be a write-off because everybody's going to be doing random stuff and you just know it's not going to be efficient to pass the planet in that regard. And I know that alpha gaming can be summarized as more of a player problem than a game problem, but different games allow for alpha gaming in more ways, and this one allows for a very heavy case of alpha gaming because every scenario is so strict on how to solve it. I played the Great Western Trail New Zealand solo mode the other week, and I can try multiple different strategies on there, but depending on what the AI is doing, I can kind of adapt and try different things to beat them by whichever path I choose. But there's no paths here. Every box is one path to victory, and that is it. Follow the path or you lose. It's a bit like telling Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, follow the yellow brick road, because if you venture anywhere off the yellow brick road, you will die. That's basically what this game is like, and I don't want that.
You kids are soft.
Even your turns feel a bit on the restrictive side. I got 3 cubes here, but 2 of them have to be on non-actions, 1 of them has to be a rest. So this action on your board doesn't even count, because it's literally, one of my dice has to go on rest, and it levels up. Mandatory, I don't have a choice, I can't choose to not rest. And that means I've only got 2 cubes to play with. But then you've got 5 actions on your board, and 3 of them you're going to do 90% of the time. Theorize, investigate, and traverse. They're going to be your 3 main actions. Support you'll do every now and again. It removes a distress, only relevant if that person has a distress, and moves your happy track up. But that's about it. And the problem is your happy track goes up and down so goddamn often, most of the time down, that you either spam support, in which case you haven't got enough time to actually fulfill the mission, or you just accept that your morale is going to be low for the most part and there's not much else you can do about it. Recover, you will pretty much never do this action ever. It levels up your cube 3 times. So even from like a 0 perspective, it can level it up all the way to max. But are you going to use 50% of your cube actions just to level up a die? Probably not. There's other ways to level up the focus on some of these actions, but it also, for some reason, moves your morale down. Why does my morale decrease when I recover? That doesn't make any sense. But given that how hard it is to get morale up, and if you happen to go low on morale when you're already low, you end up having to devalue your dice, your cubes, even further, there's no reason for me to use recover for that sense. So I'm pretty much doing occasional support and these top 3 actions. That's it. The rest of your actions have to come from collecting resources, or if you have found a discovery that has an action on it, doing that.
The problem is choice.
So Unsettled is really going to depend on what you want from this game, and I can see people really liking it. When you look at the opinions of this game, it is really divisive. It's one of the most divisive examples out there. And I can see where people who are just in it for that big puzzle, they don't care if there's a bit of a replay value issue or the fact that playing it with other players might involve, you know, a little bit of a alpha gamery thing. If that stuff doesn't bother you and you're just interested in this puzzle aspect with the cubes, then you're going to get a kick out of this game, regardless of the fact that it's quite restrictive in places. But for me and some others, I just found this a bit of a disappointment because I wanted to have a bit more creativity with what I did, and the first play of each box is fine, it's not bad, it's, if anything, quite fun to delve into a planet box for the first time, but knowing that my first game is essentially going to be a loss unless I conveniently do it the right way from the get-go, I don't waste any time whatsoever, and luck smiles on me, chances are I'm going to lose that first game. So there's 2 hours of my life I'm effectively wasting knowing that I'm not going to win it. You know, I don't need to win every single game I play, but seriously, I like to know I stand a chance. And knowing that you pretty much don't stand a chance with your first game of each planet is kind of a bit annoying. But even then, just the fact that every single scenario you play is one path and it's gotta be that way, that just irks me. I don't like that in games when they get too restrictive like that, and this one just feels ultimately restrictive. Even things like the cubes themselves. I mean, I've got 3 cubes here. 2 of them go on actions, one of them has to be a rest. Always. You always have to rest with 1 die. So I'm only getting 2 actions per turn, plus the occasional little bonus thing. And again, that just feels like work. Feels like a kind of restriction that I don't need. You know, there's good stuff here. I mean, I like, you know, some of the things they've done with the trays, even though it's a massive table hog. The artwork and the component quality is still really good. And the puzzle is still fun up to a point, but once you pass that point, it gets very stale and you start getting a little bit frustrated with it, not to mention the colossal rules learning that you have to do beforehand with a rulebook that is not perfect by any means and completely filled with a lot of text that requires a lot of reading. It's, you know, it's got good potential and I can see why people really like this game, but for me, it just fell short on a few aspects here. When I first played it in the 7-8 category, I thought, oh yeah, this is a good game I can endorse. But it's dropped more and more with more plays, and I just think that at the moment, I need to settle on a 5 out of 10. It's an average game. It's not bad at all. There were good things I liked about this, and I did enjoy aspects of my first plays of each planet. But the more that those restrictions set in, the more that I realized it was all one path and that's it, it did kill my desire to want to repeat play any planets. So I feel that even if I had I've got the whole Supernova pledge, I would probably enjoy my first encounter with each planet. But even then, I know that with the first encounter, I'm just going to fail the mission basically, and then once I've played it once, it's purely a case of, right, well, I know what all the mission objectives are, so I know I need to do it this way and no other way. That for me doesn't make for a good fun sci-fi exploration type game. It just makes for an optimization puzzle that in this case is a bit too much for what it is.
Now, there'll be plenty of time to discuss your objections when and if you return.
So that's it for me on this episode of The Broken Meeple. If you like what you see, then please thumb it up on YouTube and thumb it up on Board Game Geek when it goes live on the page. Don't forget to check out all the other content I've done, top 10 sandbox games, and the recent live stream I did with Mark Monk to talk about designer quirks that annoy us in games. I don't think any of those designer quirks are in this game. I don't know. I'll have to recheck the list. But by all means, go check it out. Obviously, let me know your comments below. I want to know if you love the game or if you hate the game, and I suspect I'm going to get a good mix of both from you. And given that this game is very divisive, and it's going to depend on your wants from a game as to whether you like it or not, I think it would be useful to get a lot of different perspectives. So by all means, chime in. Until next time, remember, regardless of whether you decide a tray to a timer track is worth it or not, it's still only a game. So take care, and bye for now.